The fourth top 10 list of liability risks affecting churches and charities is with respect to outside user groups. And this is a growing issue, especially for churches that have newer facilities with large fellowship halls, kitchen facilities, banquet facilities, and gymnasiums. Because what's happening is you will have a variety of people from your community requesting use of your facilities, either as individuals, as businesses, other charities, or other churches. And the fact of the matter is that their actions, their negligence on your premises can create legal liability for your organization. Case in point, this goes back probably 10 or 12 years ago. There was a church with a relatively new facility who were in an urban area and who were approached by another congregation about using their facilities. And the host church was very enthusiastic to help this smaller congregation. And in fact, they allowed the use of their facilities for free. They handed over their facilities for this other congregation to use on a Saturday. And they could run their services, their youth programs, their Sunday school throughout the course of the day. And this arrangement worked well for a little while. Well, one Saturday, the smaller congregation that was using the facility to sponsor an upcoming event temporarily put a banner on the front of their lawn and the front of their property. And what they did, and this was an ethnic congregation who weren't completely aware of laws and regulations and risk management that we have here in Canada, and they thought it would be a good idea to put the banner right at the front of the property, right near the road. And so what they did is they used a cable with the banner and they tethered it. And the cable ran across the municipal sidewalk and was pegged in the seam between the curb and the sidewalk. Later that morning, a cyclist came along. It was a teenage girl. She did not see the cable. She hit the cable at a high speed. She went over the handlebars and landed on her head, and she was paralyzed permanently. The parents, after they got over the initial shock and the medical care, hired a lawyer to investigate. The lawyer found out what had happened. The lawyer understood it was this other congregation. But this other congregation were new Canadians. They didn't have assets. They didn't have any liability insurance. They didn't really have much resources to pay for a claim. And so in the statement of claim that was presented on behalf of the injured girl, the defendant party was the host church. The host church, it was their property. They had the assets. They had the valid and collectible liability insurance. And the statement of claim was drafted in such a way to try to elicit a response to their responsibilities as the host church, the occupier of the property. And so now you have a situation where in trying to help, you've actually exposed yourself, your organization, your directors, and your assets to a liability suit over a program and an activity that you had no oversight of, no supervision, and frankly, no knowledge of, really. Okay, so that's a worst case scenario, but a very good example to understand what the risk is when outside groups use your facilities. And again, the sources of litigation would be any employees, members, clients, guests, or participants of that outside user group while they're on your property if they should suffer an injury. Now, the sources of coverage, well, first of all, your organization, if you own a building and you're being approached by outside user groups, you certainly do have liability coverage to protect yourself if the lawsuit is coming from someone injured in their events. You do have coverage for that. The challenge or the question is, do you want to have insurance claims on your record that have nothing to do with your programs or negligence? And if I guess the way to look at this in a balanced way is you're trying to help these groups or these individuals. What assistance you're providing them is free or below market rent or access to facilities. That's how you're helping them. You shouldn't be holding the bag when it comes to their legal liability. And that's why it's very important when individuals, businesses, or outside groups use your facilities, that part of your contract with them is they are required to give you proof of their liability insurance, their general liability insurance, so that you know that if they're negligent, they have coverage under their own policy. That coverage should be probably a minimum of $2 million general liability coverage, and they should give you a certificate confirming that they have named your church as additional insured, so that if your church or board are named arising out of their negligence, you have rights and coverage under their policy, so that a claim doesn't affect your coverage and your policy unnecessarily. In addition to the requirement for proof of insurance, it's also a good idea just generally to have occupancy or rental agreements for outside groups, because it can also outline other things such as prohibited use of the facility and guidelines as they use your premises. And other than outside groups and organizations, I want to also mention one other thing about outside parties on your property. Many churches will have contractors, landscapers, who do work or maintenance on the property. These individuals or businesses can also create negligence for you by what they do or how they do their job. And again, we do recommend that if somebody's re-roofing your building, somebody is maintaining your sidewalks for ice and snow, your parking lot, that you also get proof of insurance from these organizations or businesses. And they are doing this as a business. They should be carrying liability insurance. If they're not carrying liability insurance, that would be a red flag that you don't want to use their services. Okay? And we do also, and again, we have plenty of examples of claims and situations go wrong, but we did have a total fire loss at a church in British Columbia where a contractor was re-roofing the building, a tar and gravel roof. They use an open flame. It's called a torsion application. And it's like the flat roofs that you'll see on many buildings. So there's a lot of heat and an open flame. And one of the challenges with tar and gravel roofing is that sometimes there are hot spots created that you don't actually see. You are supposed to stick around, and with an infrared gun, you're supposed to basically be able to detect hot spots and wait around for at least a half an hour after the last application. In this particular claim that happened, it appears that the roofers on a Saturday were in a rush to go out for the evening, didn't stick around the way they were supposed to, didn't check for hot spots. Shortly after they left, a neighbor called the fire department saying there were flames coming through the church roof. And by the time the fire department got there and put the fire out, it was a total loss. It was about a $2.7 million building. In the aftermath and the investigation of this claim, it also came to light that although the roofer had all these nice brochures about being bonded and insured and how wonderful they were, we found out they did not have liability insurance for tar and gravel roofing, for torsion roofing. There is no coverage. So when we paid our client's claim. When we went to subrogate against the other party, which they should reimburse because it's their legal responsibility, there was no coverage. They basically declared bankruptcy. And our church was left with a $2.7 million claim that had nothing to do with their negligence. So again, important to remember that these kinds of contractors or third parties doing work on your facilities should also be required to give proof of insurance.